Hello and welcome to the Bovasin Outdoor Chronicles. My name's Jared.
And my name's Garett.
We're two brothers who love the outdoors, and we spend most of our money and all of our free time on our adventures.
From working all week
to playing all weekend,
we find ourselves
surviving the week to live on the weekends.
Well, speaking
You're
about...
supposed to say that with me. Surviving
the
week
to live on the weekends.
Wait, one more. Surviving the week to
live on the weekends.
All right.
You know, I like to just fly. I like it to be different.
Well,
kind of
I'm
like
glad you're not my pilot.
Kind of like Seinfeld at the beginning of the episodes where it's just the jazz, right?
Yeah.
The bass line.
Uh-huh.
But speaking about working, who we have via online is my old boss.
I take it you guys parted ways good. And like he didn't fire you.
Yeah.
Okay.
he didn't give me a choice.
But I had to talk about what a power move. So I work with Jesse. He was my boss. And in his office, he hung a giant whitetail. I mean, what a power move. You go into the guy's office and you can't even look at him because you're too distracted looking at the giant deer he has hanging on the wall.
I can see it in the picture behind you, Jesse. Is that it?
Well, actually, let's just do that.
Oh,
dude, there it is.
Look. Oh, Jesus. And where you don't have to, don't share your shot, not your spot, but state-wise, where did you get that?
I was Northern Missouri.
Northern Missouri?
Public land.
Beautiful. And public land, too.
That's impressive.
Oh, yeah.
All the way around. So, kind of going back to how you're clearly a big hunter. We've talked multiple times about kind of the different adventures we've been on. Where did you get your start? Where did you always grow up hunting, or how did that come into your life?
It started in a stinky, musty 900 square foot cabin in northern Pennsylvania, about 30 miles south of the New York border. So we had a little cabin along a stream, and we were surrounded by state forest. There was no agricultural land or nothing. It was just all wood deer. We call them big woods, and we have an hour drive to the top of the mountain, and then you hunt the mountains all day.
Okay, is that like thick timber then?
We would call it big woods here.
Big woods. Okay.
It's opened up quite. It's like 50-50 big woods open, and then a lot of thick underbrush, and like some places where they had logged off, you can't even walk through it. It's so thick, and that's pretty much your bedding areas and your little sanctuaries that are in the middle of these public areas that you just have to find the trails and figure out where they're coming in and out. And when 1 million hunters hit the woods on one day, you have to figure out where the escape trails are and go to the escape trails. And that's when I started being successful.
So that's different, very different from Montana. Yes. Is it a lot of tree stand hunting then?
The public land and the hunt clubs, they do a lot of stand hunting in Pennsylvania, and with bow. But when you're hunting the public land in the big woods of the public land, you can carry your stand in with you. But when you're hunting with rifle, you really aren't. There was very, very few. In fact, I remember one time we came across a guy that was in a stand, and we were like, "What the heck are you doing?" It was just a novel thing back then because everybody was on the ground.
Okay. So you said one day, is that hunting season? Because like in Montana, we have quite a few, or was it 2 months of hunting season rifle? So
a month.
How about like season length down over there?
So it was, the opening of rifle season was bigger than Christmas in my area. And so you have Thanksgiving, usually have off the day before Thanksgiving, you go out squirrel hunting or rabbit hunting. We rabbit hunted a lot over beagles. And then Thanksgiving Day, maybe you go out and shoot some squirrels in the morning out in the backwoods. Actually, it was trespassing now that I think about it because we didn't own those woods. But but when you're little, you don't know that, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, everybody heads to the cabins. There used to be all kinds of accidents on the small roads because everybody knew that everybody's heading to the cabins. And so Black Friday was never a thing. I never knew anything about Black Friday. That was the day everybody's heading to the cabins.
That was the cabin day.
And then, and then so Friday afternoon and Saturday, you go rabbit hunting. It's the very end of small game season. Sunday, you can't hunt in Pennsylvania. Well, now you can, but I think a couple weekends you can, but you couldn't then. So what do? You wait until 9 o'clock, and there's a little town that, I don't even want to call it a town. I think they call it a hamlet, and that our little cabin was in, because it's like population, I don't know, 80, 70.
Oh, wow.
And there was a shooting range that we were members to. So you couldn't shoot before 10 o'clock because church was in session. So then you go shoot, sight in your rifles, and go shoot some clay pigeons for a little bit. And whoever's the loser has to buy a case of beer. Go pick up the beer, go sit down and watch football, and hang out at the cabin and play cards until the next morning. Because Monday after Thanksgiving was always first day of rifle season. Then we would have not even a full 2 weeks, because it's a Monday to the second Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can't hunt until you're 12 years old. So I didn't even get to hunt the very first week that I was almost 12. I only got a half a season in.
Oh, yeah. So was that like a family cabin then? You grew up hunting with that with your dad, grandpa?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was my dad, his hunting buddy, and then maybe another one here or there. He got married, and an older, I call him my big brother, stepbrother. He would hunt with us. And then when my younger brother, who's 10 years younger, got old enough, I took him under my wing, and he was kind of like my little mentee, and I would teach him, and all the stupid stuff in the woods that you teach somebody who's 12 years old when you're 22, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot of good fun with them. But the cool thing was, when I got married and moved to Philadelphia, I couldn't hunt as much during that little season. So my dad would take my half brother, who my dad is not related to at all, it's his ex-wife. He adopted them, and they became hunting buddies. So pretty cool little story.
Yeah, really cool. Kind of bonded through the venture of the hunt, even though maybe not by blood.
You guys, everybody went out on this opening day, if you will, bigger than Christmas. Did you have like your spots? Because I know out here I have some spots, right? And there's some spots I go to opening day, and there's some spots I go to more in the rut, right? But it's public land, but in my head, they're my spots, right? And nothing bugs me more than getting up at 4 a.m, driving. I get there before light, and somebody's already parked where I want to go in my spot. So I know hunting over there is maybe a little different. I didn't know if you had like, what is he doing in this part of the forest? He knows this is our, we have the northwest side of the mountain, or however that works.
Yeah. I can still name off the hollows in the mountain that we would hunt. And a couple years we had to divert because of floods washing out roads, and we'd have to go to almost said a place. Had to go to another area. But that's not where I learned how to hunt there. But out of my cabin, let's say we had 6 guys hunting every year. In 20 years of hunting there, I think we shot 4 deer. There's very few deer. There's like 3 deer per square mile, or was, before they put anti restrictions in. But I had already moved to Texas and was hunting in Texas for a couple of years. But I'd say the most of my public land, cutting my teeth, was northern Missouri, because my buddy was a pastor. He'd off on Fridays. I learned how to work on one of these so that I could sit in a tree stand. And yeah, that's the public wars, because you have a lot smaller public land spots, and you can bow hunt them all season. And then come rifle season, all of a sudden you've got 4 guys sitting within 60 yards of you, and you're like, what the heck am I doing here? So we would leave super early in the morning to get just to park. You may not even get out of your truck, but yeah, it's definitely a race. So we upped our game this year. We decided to rent a cabin that was about a half mile from where we hunt on public land.
Oh,
that was a game changer for us.
There you go. So you said Pennsylvania, that's where you grew up, kind of the old hunting cabin, kind of got that culture. And then you said that you moved to Philadelphia. So what's that timeline look like, I guess, as far as what you're hunting, what states, and how you moved throughout your life?
So early 80s through 2004, I was in Pennsylvania. And when I lived down near Philly, I'd still go up for opening weekend of rifle and for opening weekend of trout season because you guys are spoiled. You can fish trout all year round, but back there you can only fish from the middle of April on. Then in Texas, I took off a year of hunting because brand new, young family, had to figure out Texas, and gosh, there's not much public land down there. You just walk on land down there and you might not come back. It's a rough area. But I think for a couple years, then I ended up getting on 2 different deer leases because that's really how you hunt in Texas. You get on a deer lease, you set up your feed. Everybody's expected to set up a feeder, so everybody's kind of like put in the same money. Then you kind of hunt your area until people stop hunting or they get their deer, and you can kind of move around on the lease a little bit. And that's when I said, I'm gonna teach myself how to bow hunt. Nobody in my family ever bow hunted. I always wanted to. And that's where I started bow hunting, was on these Texas leases and through TexasBowhunter.com. All those guys in there, I think there's like 50,000 guys on there that everybody would mentor you, help you, shoot with you. I taught myself how to bow hunt from tree stands, from blinds. And then when rifle season come around, you get a rifle. But it was really when I started bow hunting and studying the deer, passing on deer, waiting for mature deer, that your game just elevates so much when when you're bow hunting, because you observe a lot more. Something's out there 50, 70 yards. Mind you, this is middle America, not you Montana boys who fling them way out there. But anyhow, something's out there 50 to 100 yards. You're observing, and you get to watch how they interact with one another. And there's a lot to learn from studying the animal instead of just see it, point, and shoot, which is I grew up doing, because again, you didn't see many legal deer to be able to shoot where I was. So if it was legal, you shot right away, because if you didn't, the guy on the other side of the hollow was going to shoot it.
Yeah.
Interesting. But you even talked about that this year. The deer you shot, laid down, you're able to like watch it for like an hour and kind of enjoy that deer, rather than, because you're right, like with the rifle, it's like you got to make your shot now or you miss your opportunity. It's done.
Well, and in public land in Montana is even getting that way, to where there's deer when we were younger. I mean, it's crazy. There's deer when I was 16 years old that I'd pass up on, that now I probably don't. And the reason being is the elevated pressure. It's like, back 15, 16 years ago, I could let that deer grow because chances are I'm going to see him next year. Like there was a few deer I had watched for a few years, right? Kind of in that middle teens to early 20s era of my life. Now there is no chance I'm seeing that deer again, because there's somebody on the other side of the hill that's, filming a Montana mule deer hunt and is going to shoot him with milk still on his lips. So it's like, it's either them or it's me. And yeah,
it's interesting, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's a conversation we have all the time on public land in back in Missouri. I mean, I still go back there. I have my spots.
Mm-hmm.
When you need meat, you go there. And I'm still cutting my teeth, brand new hunting here in Colorado. Even when I was mule deer hunting in Montana, it's like fishing is fishing. You've got you've got pond fishing and lake fishing with your boat and bass, and then you've got trout fishing with your fly rod and streams and reading the eddies, and it's both fishing, 2 totally different things. If you take that guy fishing in one and stick him in the other, they have to learn all over again. That's where I'm at. So mule deer hunting and elk hunting, it's been my dream all my life. I mean, I've got an elk on my arm, but this is going to be my first year really kind of getting into it. But yeah, that public land pressure in the small plots. I mean, there's a big place that I go to where this guy was shot, or this guy was shot. This guy was backyard. Even 3,500 acres gets crowded pretty quick.
Yeah.
You bump into people all the time.
And like we started backcountry elk hunting a few years ago. Like we're 3 or 4 miles in, like where it's not a little walk out to the truck, And all of a sudden you look over and on that ridge there's a dude walking, and you feel like, how much more can I do to get away from these guys? You know, like there's land everywhere. I tried to get as far back in as I can. I might not even see elk back here. I'm just trying to get away from people.
There's no elk back there, but there's no people.
Yeah. So
that's been my mantra.
Worse. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we would on public land in Missouri. You had to pack all your stand stuff in, your steps, your stand, your clothing, because I mean you're not walking in fully clothed. And we'd be hiking in a mile and a half to get to spots that we've scouted, and you're not allowed to have any type of motorized vehicles whatsoever. So you get in there and you're up in your stand, and then 30 minutes before dark, somebody comes by on their four-wheeler, and you're like,
"Yeah,
I put all this effort out." Yeah,
that ticks me off more than anything when somebody breaks the rules, because it's like, look, dude, we could all break the rules.
Yep.
And the issue is you ruin it for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, oh God, that just makes me sick.
That's why shooting a mature deer on public land is such a trophy, because it's so hard. The pressure, the people that are cheating, the people that are hunting year round.
Yeah,
it's a serious thing. So now that I've transitioned to mule deer and elk as my focus, I had a buddy's like, well, do you want to go shoot a whitetail? Because we don't have them quite as big here as you do in northern Missouri. I'm like, I've got that bucket filled, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you say that too, because the Outdoor Channel, when I was growing up, it was a lot of guys in tree stands on private ranches shooting huge deer, and
3 per episode.
Yeah. And they're like, look at all 3 of us on this ranch and they're just clangers, right? And it was fun to watch for a bit, but after a while, it like cheapened it. It's like every private ranch is producing these huge deer because no one gets to hunt them. They're feeding them out of feeders, and in the off season, they're feeding them shit to grow their horns, like,
protein.
Yeah. And then I like what I grew up doing. It's like, we get none of that, and I don't get to watch a deer on cameras all year and pattern him and then, go out and be like, hey, I'm putting my stand here because I watched this buck and he's fed here all year. In
Missouri, you're not even allowed to use cameras.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's kind of a disconnect between those two worlds, and they're totally different worlds, right? Like it's almost a different sport to be hunting those kind of farmed whitetails, if you will, on these ranches than then shooting something on public. You know what I mean?
Well, and I have to say that I did a management hunt. It wasn't even a hunt. It was a biological calling of deer on the King Ranch down in Texas.
Oh, the King Ranch. Ooh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And so we spent 2 days. That was like a history lesson showing up there. I didn't know much about it. This is before the King Ranch version F-150s came out.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my employees, I was working in Texas, running an environmental group, and one of my employees, his roommate in college is a biologist on the King Ranch, or was. And he called us up on a Wednesday and said, hey, this is the last weekend of the season. You want to come help us call out some deer? We have a lot of doe tags to fill. Be down here on Friday. We're like, okay. And then you drive 3.5, 4 hours to a quarter of the way across the state. Well, you guys know you're in Montana. It takes like 5 days to get across. And we drove around in an F-250 from pasture to pasture, and they said, we have this many tags to shoot in this pasture and this pasture. And half the time we didn't even get out of the truck. I mean, we'd go out, we'd dispatch them and throw them in the back of the truck. Then we'd go and weigh them, age them, throw them in they had these like coolers or freezers, refrigerator buildings all over this place. Because the King Ranch used to be the size of Rhode Island.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's huge.
Yep.
And I think there was 3 of us, and in 2.5 days, I think we shot 32 deer.
Oh, dang.
just stacked them into the coolers. And then a pastor from Mexico came up with one of those old Chevy back end trailers behind his truck, and we just loaded them all up and took them to an orphanage to make into tamales. So I got the call one buck. It was the biggest buck of my life at the time. It was a really nice 10-point with a kicker. And as I was about to shoot it, they kept saying, make sure you shoot the right one, because it was with another racker. And I said, of course, I'm not an idiot. And they're like, come on, Yankee, shoot the right one. And then I pause. I'm like, oh crap. And I had to feel like that would have been about a $6,500 mistake. Shooting the wrong one. But yeah, that was a pretty cool adventure.
Yeah.
I can imagine
that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what my dreams are like. You go there and they're giant deer and you want to shoot this one, shoot that one.
Stack them up.
Yeah.
So
and see a flock of turkeys about 100-fold all gobble at the same time. I literally lost my. I lost everything on that one. I was laughing so hard.
Well, and two, being from kind of the, I guess I don't want to say the East, but mid East maybe. Do you call it the Midwest? I don't know where that.
Pennsylvania is the East Coast.
East. Okay, East Coast.
Yeah.
Turkey hunting is like a religion, right? Out there, like people love it.
Yeah.
Where we grew up here and we love turkey hunting, but a lot of guys, it's like, what do you mean you're hunting turkeys?
Yeah.
They're just like, nah,
that's
whatever.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. By that time, I transitioned into fishing. So.
Yeah.
And I think if I recall one of our conversations, something about like a trout park. Am I recalling right? Back where they like stocked fish and you're allowed so many. Can you dive into that?
Oh, Pennsylvania stocks fish. I mean, that's why you can't fish from essentially all of March until that opening day of April, because they're stocking all their streams. Not many of the streams stay cold enough to hold trout year round. Of course, I grew up fishing those 6-foot wide streams where you're in camo and you're backpacking and there's native brookies. That's what I love doing. But on the bigger streams, so my dad started way back, I think this is like the 42nd year now. So back in the 70s, 76, 78, he started this thing called Fishmas Eve, the night before Fishmas, which Fishmas would be the opening day of trout season.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a reason for everybody to go to the cabin and party and drink. And then when I got old enough to get to go, you're privy to certain things, but not other things.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens at Fishmas stays at Fishmas. But see, my dad passed away in 2021, right after Christmas. I happened to go back to Pennsylvania for 2020 and fished opening day with him, Fishmas.
Mm-hmm.
Got some pictures of him. After he passed away in January of 21, my brother flew back from Texas. I flew back from Kansas City at the time. We took my dad's little stool with us and we fished. And I can't tell you how many fish we caught that day. It was the most fish that my brother and I had ever caught. We were literally catching fish on every single cast, doubling up. Got to a point that we finished the day across the creek from the cabin. You could see the lights on in the cabin. We just got tired. I think we may have even run out of bait, because I was a spin fisherman back then. And we just sat on the bank, watched the beaver come up by us. We see the cabin, and we just both knew this is the last time we were going to fish here. And we only had that kind of day because Pop's memory was with us.
Mm-hmm.
But we've continued that tradition. When I was in Montana, my brother came up when we did Fishmas. We're now planning our third one here in Colorado, and we are absolutely slaying them with not just little stockies, but we're averaging probably 16 to 20 inch fish on fly rods now. We actually feel, again, it's like transitioning from rifle to bow, from spin fishing to fly fishing. But yeah, it's called Fishmas. So we just keep the tradition going. It's this Fishmas 2025 is coming up.
So is it still on the same day? Is it like April, or does the Fishmas day change? It just depending on when you're going to have it.
Yeah, that's a sore spot. My brother's a teacher in Texas, so he took off to come up 2 years in a row. And this year he's like, I can't. We got to wait till June this year.
Delayed Fishmas.
It really, It doesn't matter as long as we get time to hang out with each other and
Keep
and
telling
fish for a
yourself
couple
that.
days.
I know what I'm doing on the real Fishmas. I'll send you a picture.
But that's something that's cool about that. I mean, a tradition started with your dad and that you and your brother are keeping alive. I mean, we hunt with our old man a lot, and there's definitely less that he's able to do. Like, he doesn't do the backcountry stuff with us. But even a lot of the reasons, like, we'll go and do milder trips just because it's like dad can go along and then we can get that bonding. And there's just something kind of special about being out in the wilderness and kind of forming those memories and carrying it on to the next generation.
There's certain lessons you learn as a hunter, fisherman, that's passed down from generation to generation. Can't be taught in a school, on the internet, on an iPad. I mean, this last Fishmas, we had a brand new person join us. My son, who's now 21, and that was the weirdest, most surreal feeling to be sitting around the cabin and hanging out with my son at the same time at Fishmas. It's just, and so the tradition's just continuing to grow.
Maybe someday he'll be sitting there on your stool, you know? Yeah, really. Come full circle.
I can hope, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. His kid will be 21 and he'll be looking and going, man, this is a weird feeling.
But I like the fact that, I mean, rifle hunting, then you're bow hunting, and then bait fishing, spin fishing, and then fly fishing. Like Jared and I, we pride ourselves in like, yeah, if it catches fish, let's do it. You know, I feel like a lot with the outdoors is like, oh, I'm a bow hunter, I bow hunt. Or it's like, oh, I'm a fly fisherman, I fly fish.
You kind of get this elitist feel from people, you know?
Oh my gosh,
yeah, I've been scoffed at on the river before by guys fly fishing, you know, and I'm like, how many fish you got? Yeah. That's jealousy, dude, is what that is.
I mean, I think it's all fun, and if it all catches fish or all fills the freezer, why not try it?
And I mean, we picked up bow hunting, not necessarily because we like think bow hunting is awesome, but it's just, it extended our season, and you know, we're chasing a little bit more elk during bow season. So it's
but I gotta say, to sit in northern Missouri, let's just say southern Iowa, around the 7th of November when the rut is absolutely crushing, and to be sitting 20 feet up with your bow, completely silent, completely camouflaged, and to have deer just sprinting around you, clueless that you're there because they're like drunk college students at a bar. They don't care about anything but one thing.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there enjoying it. The mayhem and the craziness, and it could happen in any time of the day. Any time of the day is absolutely in a rush that I'll never give that up. But then again, I've never been bow hunting close enough for elk to have them bugling to the point where it hurts my ears. I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah, we've had a few pretty close encounters.
Yeah,
you know, where we've had bull elk walk between us 5 or 6 feet from us. Yeah, screaming their heads off, and it's cool, and then it hits a point, and you're like,
this thing is huge.
Yeah, like this thing could kill me like this quick. You know, like this is getting a little dangerous. You know, and they walk by you, and that's a cool feeling for sure.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
I
had a moose do that to me this year. That I was
really,
like, I'm not the big dude anymore. I'm 6'4" and I'm looking up to him.
So tell me about the moose. Garett was telling. So you worked with Garett in Montana, and were you up here? Did you live in Billings for a bit?
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't like a remote boss.
No,
or
we were there in the hood.
In the hood. So, did you leave from where you guys were working together and head down to where you're at now in Colorado, or was there a few different stops along the way?
No, I had another job where I was doing drone work and did some surveys for the floods that happened up there in what was it? Was it Gallatin? No. What's the town at the North Gate?
Gardner.
Yellowstone. Gardner, yeah. So I helped the county with that, with doing some drone work, and then I was actually talking with the park about doing some pilot projects for using drones for elk surveys, some browse surveys for the for the bison, doing some protective thermal one-offs for like kill sites along trails, and they needed to go remove it. They needed somebody to be in the sky to check to make sure there was no bogeys around when they were taking care of a kill site. But that's not allowed by the Department of Interior. So they were going to have to propose a pilot project, and I was in the middle of that when our parent company shut us down on December 31st of that year. I was sucked because it was so cool to be talking with these guys about these types of breaking. And they actually started to work with a college about using drones. So if you ever see drone footage in Yellowstone, it's not me, but we got the conversation.
Got the ball rolling.
Oh my gosh, I was in heaven. But no, I moved down here. I live south of Denver in a little community. Moved down here for work, and now the company I work for, we do a lot of work with the Department of Transportations in the cities, but we also do wildlife crossings, do some fish capture facilities in the Northwest. I'm doing some work on those, doing the permitting and all the environmental compliance work. Cool project I'm working on right now is a wetland restoration and moose management project for Rocky Mountain National Park. I get paid in a couple of weeks to go up there for 3 days and host a workshop for us to come up with alternatives to, I'm not going to say get rid of this invasive species called the moose, but did you know that it's an invasive species in Colorado?
No.
Yeah,
They don't want them there?
Not the park. Not the scientists in the park.
What?
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so, this is, you got me going here. All right. So, there's a lot of stuff that's gone on with national parks over the years, right? And what I've come to the conclusion is nobody really knows what they're talking about. It's just kind of the popular opinion at the time, right? Like Yellowstone Park, they used to want to conserve everything in the park as far as elk goes and stuff. So they were shooting predators, right? You didn't let wolves in, you shot coyotes, kept it good. Well, the elk herds got huge, and then it can't support itself. So there was like major disease. Well, I think the federal government ended up coming in and like killing 5,000 elk for a few years there. And I want to say it was in the 60s maybe or 70s. Again, don't like fact check me. This is just this
rough
happened,
timeline.
but rough timeline. Yeah. And
it's
then
what your grandpa told you. Huh?
Yeah. Well, then there was this guy, Leopold is his last name. If I was more into it, you might know more about him, but he kind of changed the face of how you view national parks. And that's where this whole thing where it's an ecosystem, you can't just keep all the predators out came from, but also this idea that if there's a fire, you have to just let it burn. Right?
Okay. All right. I got to stop you there.
Okay.
Because I literally at the grocery store the other day, as I'm walking out, this lady with like 4 nose hoops and blue hair and says that we're the National Park Foundation. Mind you, I'm working on a project with the National Park people, right? Mm-hmm. She goes, "Have you ever heard of us?" I'm like, "No, tell me more." She goes, "Well, we're helping to clean up trash, and there's so much trash in the national parks you could fill up the state of Texas." I'm like, "No." What do you mean? Like, no, you can't do that. There's not that much trash. She goes, "Well, yeah, you've been to the parks." I'm like, "Yeah, and you don't find a lot of trash." Yeah. And then she's like, "Well, the fires. We have to help protect the fires in the parks." I'm like, "No." It's just, I'm like, who is telling you this stuff to raise money? But anyway, go ahead.
Well, it's exactly that. And, this let it burn mentality was good, or they thought it was good, and then it burned a lot of Yellowstone. So was it really good? Like maybe there should be controlled burns, right? Because you have a park and the animals don't know the boundaries, right? It's an arbitrary thing for people. We put boundaries on it. And so there is some kind of false rules that you have to apply, because this is like a living zoo, right? Where, fires are good, but maybe because it's not like you can move Yellowstone Park. So if there's going to be a forest fire, maybe we shouldn't let it burn a huge portion of the park, maybe just a little bit, because fire is good for this it's an ecosystem. There's some renew stuff that has to go on, but you could burn the whole park down and it could ruin it, right? And then we're out of a park.
I think the scale of like the park and the ecosystem doesn't make sense. Like that ecosystem's huge, right? It's doesn't abide by the park boundary.
Park boundary. So I'm coming back to this moose in Colorado. I'll get there.
An invasive species.
Yeah,
I'm still.
There's
he's
people
so fired up. He's
oh my
punching
god!
his
Well, there's
microphone and
people in this
everything.
state that think we should poison rivers and kill off all like the rainbow and brown trout because they're not native. And I'm like, at some point, species move. You know what I mean? Like if we migrated across the land bridge, if that's the Joe Rogan episode you're listening to now, right? Are we invasive in this continent? Like at some point, let the animal be there. Turkeys aren't native to Montana. How about pheasants? That's from what, China?
Yeah.
So like, and you're gonna go after are they Cirrus moose? Jesus.
Can I hear more about?
We found his touching
Yeah,
spot,
you
didn't
did. Ugh.
Can we talk about this moose project? So what are you finding?
Yeah. Well, what's the project? So are you trying to get rid of moose?
No. So the issue is the wetlands. They're losing wetlands. In fact, when we started into it, they mentioned a couple things about beavers and the decline in beavers. I'm like, wait, hold on, time out. So is it the decline in wetlands that's causing the beavers to leave, or is it the beavers leaving causing a decline in the wetlands? And their studies that they've been doing for years is how much of the willows are eaten by the moose. They literally paid people for 3 8-hour shifts to follow moose for 24 hours for 2 months at a time. And they would watch to see a bite the moose would take. And then when the moose moved on, they would go and they would take a similar bite and how much food source was in that. And like, I think they figured out like one moose is equal to like 17 elk. Don't quote me on that, but the moose are absolutely crushing the willows. I've seen a couple of fenced-in areas. You see them in Yellowstone. They're kind of like browse studies, and it's crazy how much everything is browsed down. So I'm sure it's part of NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act. There's federal funds that are going to go into this, so we got to explore alternatives. And so I'm sure some of the alternatives are going to be reducing moose numbers because they've gone from 0 to I think they were at about 100 so what's that, about 30 years? Yeah, about 100 in 2010, I believe, something like that. So that's like 30 years. They went from 0 to 100, but now they've gone up to 200. Just in the past,
as populations do, right? It's not linear.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's exponential.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they've been doing studies where they say, I'm just going to say 20, 30 years ago, there was over 200 beaver lodges in the park. And then like 10 years ago, there was like 14. And as of, I think, the last couple of years, there's 4 in the park. And that's a big park. That's not as big as Yellowstone, but it's still a big park. So there's something going on. And I'm going to sit with the scientists, and then we'll come up with some alternatives. And then with those alternatives, you go into the full-blown NEPA process and evaluating the alternatives and the downsides of each alternative and the downside of no action and doing nothing. So it becomes pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And
what's causing
keep it in
is the question, right?
What's that?
What causing it is really what it boils down to, right?
Well, and the fight here in Colorado for many things is, do you let the scientists handle the issues, or do you let the voters handle the issues? I mean, that's why they reintroduced wolves.
I was going to ask you about that, because could this moose problem be solved with some wolves? I know in Montana the moose numbers people always talk about elk because people get tattoos of elk on their arm and people love elk, right? But what doesn't get talked about much is moose, and the wolves do a number on the moose in Montana and Idaho. Like, they decimate moose populations horribly, way worse than the elk. Is that something you guys are looking into? Is, do people want wolves in Rocky Mountain or Rocky National Park?
Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say one way or the other because I don't want my face to appear on the news for anything. I can just say that when the word wolves has come up, but it hasn't come up very politely in our conversations. But I'm not going to say that's an alternative or not an alternative that we're looking at.
The wolves would probably take care of the beavers too. You know, like
if they can find them.
Yeah, it's not like wolves are
all
picky.
4 of their
Yeah,
little huts.
all 4 beavers.
But they used quote unquote sharpshooter hunting for elk. I'm going to say within 10 years ago, maybe for about 5 to 10 years, they did it where you had to go out and qualify and you had to be able to hit a plate, a steel plate at 100 yards, 200 yards, 300 yards, all within 3 minutes to be able to qualify to be a hunter. Of course, I'm sure some major drawing that 1 million people applied for. And so they had some selective hunting in areas of the park. And I don't know, maybe they'll go that route and that'll be an alternative on the moose.
Can you give us kind of like insider information on that? You know, we can be ready with our mouse clip. Because I could do that little 300 yards in 3 minutes for sure. I'll practice.
But just a couple minutes ago, he's like, no, we don't need to introduce or come in and call them out. Now it's like, oh yeah, I can get them tagged.
Well, I don't maybe agree with calling all of them out, but when you have an artificial park, you do have to manage the populations, and sometimes that means calling. What I don't want to see is the federal government coming in and calling a bunch of animal and they're left to die or left to rot, right?
Oh yeah, no, that would never happen.
Okay.
At the very least, if hunters are a vegetarian, they would donate. But it's not the situation like you would see in some of these city parks in like Chicago, where they give them all birth control or they poison them all.
Yeah.
It's something. I guarantee you, it's not going to be something that they try to wipe them all out because there's too many people that come to Colorado wanting to see moose. And just like you guys, I had no idea. I mean, I always pictured Rocky Mountains. There's a moose.
Yeah.
Nope. They were introduced in 1978.
So the wetlands are shrinking then within the park. Is that kind of the
park's losing their wetlands?
How are you tracking that? Is that a GIS or surveys? I guess how is that tracked?
The answer is yes. We bid to review historical documentation and kind of like a whole bunch of research papers for them and summarize them and give them something that they can kind of correlate and use. We were expecting like maybe 30, maybe 40 papers that we would look at. They literally gave us 500 papers ranging in size of like 6 pages to over 500-page papers. We ended up using AI to get it all into a spreadsheet, and then we were able to organize it. So if we want to look up beavers, we can type in beavers and it pulls up just the articles that we need. So we've got data and science that goes back. Well, shoot, one of them was from 1919, one of the papers that we read. But we're not just looking at the park papers. We're reading stuff all over the Rocky Mountains. We're reading about up in Canada. So it's a very elaborate data set that they're looking at.
So can you make the connection between the moose and the beavers for me? Is it that they're eating the willows and beavers make dams out of willows? Because
I don't have enough information to give you that yet.
Okay.
I don't know. We don't know if the moose are killing off the willows, which then doesn't allow the stream banks and that to stay as stabilized. It would hold the water because some of these places where they fenced off areas to see if they can keep the elk and the moose out of them, willows grew back. But guess what? They didn't grow back very well because they didn't have the hydrology. So then you start going, how do you get better hydrology where there used to be hydrology? Oh, beaver dams. Beaver dams would take these streams and they would turn them into these huge like beaver meadows.
Yes.
You've seen them.
Yep.
So
and usually there's a moose in the middle of them when I see them. It's like they come hand in hand. And I go,
with
crap,
circling.
Look at all these beaver dams, Garrett. This looks kind of moosey, you know?
Well, and that's where I started to make the correlation. Like, are beavers an indicator species? And is one of the alternatives to bring back beavers? is one of the alternatives to design man-made
beaver dams
that we can reintroduce beavers to, that then they continue to grow from there, kind of like you do with your, what's that, sourdough bread? You gotta start with
culture,
something.
a starter.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys do that.
Yeah. My wife wants to get it. We're celiac, so we don't eat a lot of bread. Sore spot. That's very interesting.
Super cool.
Well, then the only problem, if you're putting man-made beaver dams in, you'll have some nose-pierced blue hair striking the dams you're putting on the creek because it's keeping the trout from spawning or something. It's like, where do you want to draw the line of what's supposed to be natural? Because at one point, Rocky Mountain National Park didn't have beavers. So, like, are we going back then? Let's bring the saber-toothed cats back. Where are we drawing this line?
I think substantially after that.
Okay. I'm good. Like, we could have that discussion, and I'm not saying, but where do you want to put that line? You could take it back to forever.
Yeah. Well, we definitely figured out what Jared's hotspot was. You
guys got me. Well, and you know what it was too, is in preparation for this. You can't see on camera because I'm cool, but I got a whole thing of notes here. I did a lot of research, and I started researching Rocky National Park, and I thought they were reintroducing wolves. We'll talk about that. Then I got into Yellowstone. I went down this whole rabbit hole of national park management, which I think we should do an episode on because it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I was under the impression that, like, national parks always knew what they were doing. And I'm after that rabbit hole, I'm like, how the hell is Yellowstone National Park still a thing? Or there's still animals in it. So, yeah. I'm very interested to talk to you and see this side of, because I do think in nature there's these causes and effects that people don't really recognize in the beginning. There's a really cool one a guy was talking about I wanted to bring up, and now it escapes me. But it's like, the tuna fishing or sardine fishing in the north, or maybe salmon fishing in the north, has decreased these salmon numbers, and they're seeing like the forests in the Pacific Northwest getting sicker because they've now found that the salmon runs that go up the rivers, because normally the rivers are dead, right? I'm talking like high in Alaska and stuff. These salmon runs that go up aren't as big anymore. Well, tons of stuff fed on these fish when they came up the rivers. Well, then they would defecate in the forest, and they could actually trace these minerals that are coming, from plankton in the ocean into krill, into fish, into bears, back to these trees. Yeah. And just by fishing that tuna, they're like making the forests. And so that's these ecosystems, and it's so interconnected to draw a line and say, we don't want moose in our wetlands in our little park in this little square is like, it just baffles me. It's like, you can't control it. There's so much we can do, and there's so much that's just way out of our hands.
Yeah.
So,
but when we saw the request for a proposal, and it said moose management on it, everybody's like, oh, it's a wetland restoration project, and I'm like, yeah, but there's a moose management in the name, but they don't say anything in the document about managing the moose.
Yeah.
So I knew what that meant in the back of my mind. So well, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Well, that's really cool. And who knows, maybe something will come out of it. Maybe there is some weird, like, you might catch footage of like maybe moose hate beavers like elephants hate mice, and you catch the first footage of like moose stomping out beavers or something. It has nothing to do with the willows or the wetlands. It's just like this weird interspecies prehistoric hatred that's genetically passed down.
But having all that document to be able to then compile it and look through it, that's a huge data source. That's pretty dang cool project.
AI has advanced that so much. If you didn't have that, the hours, who could keep all that in their head?
I can tell you, I didn't budget that in my project. I did not budget reviewing 500 documents. But I did have to tell a couple of my hunting buddies who are biologists that are helping with that. I'm like, you got to promise me not to go down a rabbit hole don't be a Jared and disappear and read this 500-page document. You don't have time for that. But yeah, Garrett, it's a lot different than what we were working on, isn't it?
Yeah, that sounds a lot more interesting than what I was doing at that past life for sure. But so you just moved to Colorado. Have you been out hunting much at all in Colorado now, or this is kind of your first year trying it out?
No, you have to be a resident for, I don't know if it's 6 or 9 months, but by the time we moved here, essentially I was out of it for a whole season as a resident. I mean, I could have done it as a non-resident, but I'd drive back to Missouri and it was a lot cheaper to shoot a bunch of does back there. So this will be my first year, and to be honest with you, the tagging system, that's a whole show you guys need to do, is the tagging system across the states. Montana was a little difficult to figure out, but it wasn't that bad once you got into it. Colorado is a freaking mess, and they've been doing it for years. I think the only thing they do right is their preference points aren't essentially, so if you have 5 preference points plus your new tag, a lot of states will consider that you have 6 tags in the pool to get drawn for certain hunts. No, in Colorado, like, oh, if you've been collecting or paying for preference points and you've got 20 preference points, we take the top preference point in that unit. We'll give that to the person with the tag, or we'll give that tag to the person with the most preference points. Okay, who's got the next lowest or next highest? But just trying to figure out, like, even hunting season, archery is, let's just say, a month. It's not exactly a month. And then rifle doesn't start right after archery. You've got couple weeks off, and then you've got your first rifle, which is like a week, and then you've got a week off, and then you've got next rifle season, third rifle, and maybe a second rifle, and then maybe third rifle. In some areas may have fourth rifle. Well, you're dealing with migratory herds. I've hunted whitetail deer all my life. If they're kind of in this area, they're in this area when I go out to hunt. I don't care what time of year. 2 months is a major difference. The elk that you scout during the summer, you guys know that they could be 50 miles away, 40 miles away by the time you go back there and hunt.
I mean, I think we've seen elk run 6 miles like it's nothing. So, especially if your public land isn't vast.
Yeah.
They're there or they're not. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Is the
so
week off, I wonder, is that to let them rest or so they're not so spooked? Or
I bet you. Yeah, no, I bet you that's what it is. I haven't talked to anybody yet, although I just found out one of my coworkers went to work for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, so I'll have to ask that question about a couple things here.
Inside man.
Yeah. Woman.
Inside woman.
Well, person.
Yeah.
Person. But no, it's so trying to pick a place. All right, you need to draw. Let's say there's 100 units. What unit are you going to put your tag, your preference points in for a tag? Because you haven't scouted it yet. And if you go scout it during the summer, you have to know back in the previous March where you're going to go. And then you go out there and scout during the summer. Hey, they're all here. And then when you go to hunt it in October, there's nothing there. So trying to figure out that as a whitetail hunter who's been going to the same place over and over again, that's a brand new thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It's interesting. Because, up here, as you know, there's no break. So in the deer move, the elk move, but you can kind of follow them all season.
Yeah. And if they're not there this week, come back next week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Be interesting. So I had to ask for you to tell the story of how you got that clanger hanging on your wall behind you. So we mentioned at the beginning of the episode.
You got it conveniently positioned so we can just see the horn sticking above your head right now. So you've got to
just kind of keep it tilted.
Yeah, exactly. So what is the story with that bad boy there? It's even got a ribbon on it.
Yeah, it took second place in the state.
Damn.
It wasn't the second biggest that year. It was the second biggest that was entered at the Deer Classic convention.
Oh, okay.
Because that's a big thing. Like Missouri will have one, I will have one, and everybody and their brother goes to it if they can get tickets to it. But the Missouri one was kind of more ho-punk at the county fairgrounds or state fairgrounds. He took second place in that. So it's not for the state, but he's big. He's bigger than anything I ever expected. So the short story short story is my buddy and I, it was our first year hunting together. We're still friends. That was 2010. We're still hunting buddies. And it was just a hard year. I think I missed my first deer with a bow twice for just weird things would happen where you hit your bow hanger or you're clipping a limb. You know how bow hunting is.
Yeah.
Stuff happens. But
sometimes you just have those days.
Oh my! Yeah. I mean, I was having one of those seasons. I literally, it was just one thing after another. And so, and this goes back to the public land hunting. We had put in at least 2 days, a Friday and a Saturday, every single weekend since the middle of September all the way to the middle of November. So we knew this property pretty well. And we had some guys from church, and it's actually an old outfitter from Colorado, said, hey, can you tell me where to go hunt here in Missouri? I've got two son-in-laws that have never hunted before. I want to take them out with me. And we said, yeah, sure, come up. We never see anybody on this property. And they came up, we camped, and we just stayed. We literally camped on the ground. The night before season opened, I bow hunted, but first I showed these guys where to hang their stands, and then I went over to another place and climbed up in my tree, and I was bow hunting that last day before rifle. And when we got back to camp, all of a sudden there's a camper rolling in, there's another camper rolling in. I mean, small gravel parking lot, right? Okay, so we're gonna have family with us apparently. And then it rained all night long. Well, the guy who was an outfitter from Colorado, he had a box trailer, and he's like, good night, boys. And he went in there, shut the door, and we're all like, well, this sucks. He's warm in there with a heater, and we're out here shivering. Yeah, that was the last time it was the last time I ever tent camped.
Yeah.
Because we froze, even though it was only 32, but it was 32 raining with like a 30-mile-per-hour wind, and our tarps were flapping all night. Anyway, not part of the hunting story, but part of the hunting story. We went out the next morning, the rain had stopped, and that's when we got overrun with guys. You know, guy walked in, waved at me, and sat down 60 yards away. Now I'm with a rifle up in a tree because it was my bow hunting setup, and my buddy's out overlooking a field up in a tree stand, overlooking a huge field. He's got like 200-300 yard shots because he's a Kansas boy. He likes those long shots over fields. And he just had guys walking across in front of him across that field. They'd wave at him, and then they'd walk across in front of him. And by 9 o'clock, we're texting each other like, dude, let's get out of here. And we just bailed. And I had already pre-scouted a place online that was east of there, about 40 minutes. I said, let's go over there, and we've got doe tags in our pockets. Let's just go drive around it until we find a parking spot that has less than one truck in, or only one truck in it. And can't find that now because I accidentally said where it was in a magazine one time. But we were able to find a parking lot with only one truck in it. We downed some food, and I said, listen, these are valleys and hollows that I'm used to hunting back in Pennsylvania. I know that there's a main trail in this park or conservation area that's at the bottom of these hollows. Let's set up at the head of the hollows before these guys head out for lunch, and maybe they'll push something up to us. And it wasn't 10 minutes after I got settled in my spot and he got into his spot. I texted him and said, hey, this reminds me of Pennsylvania. Put down my phone, and I looked ahead, and sure enough, coming right up the hollow was this. I didn't even know what it was. I just knew it was a shooter because we had antler restrictions in Missouri. I knew it was a shooter and a doe. And then they were going up the other side, and I got out in front of him, and he ran across my crosshairs, and I shot. And then I couldn't find him. I'm like, where'd he go? But it's silent. And then I found him, and he's still standing. He's kind of like facing away from me up the hill, and I got the crosshairs on him, shot again. And then he just nonchalantly just walked on that contour. Now, mind you, the bottom of this hollow is probably 60, 80 feet below me, and he's up on the other side. So we're almost eye to eye. And I just got out in front of him. He literally walked right into my crosshairs, and I had a full broadside on him, hit him, and he ran to the top of the hill and started doing the curly shuffle. And I knew it was the biggest buck I'd ever shot, but I just thought it was like a good 10 point, right? Mm-hmm. And I knew that I was on public land. I didn't know what was on the other side of this hollow, how many guys were over there hunting. I got to get over there as fast as I can to put my tag on them. And mind you, it rained all night, right? So these steep, muddy, leaf-covered it was like one of those bad dreams where you try to run and
you're a little guy, right? What
Yeah,
are you,
they're about
100 pounds?
6'4".
Yeah.
wearing a big heavy Woolrich jacket.
Yeah.
And big, I mean, that's what you did back then. Anyhow, as I crested the top of the hill, I could see where the deer was, and I'm starting to walk towards it. And I'm like, oh, he must be tangled up in a small tree, sapling. And then it dawned on me, like, that's his rack. Okay, so the hammer came back, and I'm walking like this, and I just kept saying, "Don't get up, don't get up, don't get up." And sure enough, he was done. He actually took all three of those shots. They all landed exactly where I wanted them with a 308. He took all three of them.
Jeez.
Crazy. So the biggest body deer I'd ever seen in my life, and I'm like, what the heck? And I have no cell service to tell my buddy, come over here, right? So I had to like leave the buck to go up up to a field. And, the whole time you're looking back, right, for orange. And I texted him like, get over here now. And he replied, okay, headed your way. But he's hunting quietly. He's sneaking over. He doesn't know really what's going on. And so I'm standing over this buck and I'm just staring at it. And these two guys show up because it's public land.
Mm-hmm.
They were walking in to hunt for the afternoon. And one guy's carrying a muzzleloader, the other guy's a rifle. And the guy with the muzzleloader goes, huh, you shoot that here? His buddy smacked him. He's like, no, he drug it here. Because, I mean, nobody expects to see that on public land.
Yeah.
But the highlight of the day was my buddy walking in the bottom of the hollow. I find out later he was looking for dead bodies because he thought I dropped 3 does because he heard 3 shots and I told him to get over there. So he figured I needed some help getting them out. And as soon as we made eye contact and I waved, I said, come on up here. I sat down behind the buck and I'm just holding the rack from behind, just doing this, looking at it. And I hear him go from the silent, stealth walking, hunting mode. He just yells, is that a rack? Full voice. I said, yes. And I don't know how fast he got up that hill, but he like floated up the hill. And I'm going to be very humble. I'm going to tell you, we hugged each other and jumped up and down like little girls on the schoolyard. And I had tears coming down my face because it was just a hard season. And it was just one of these things like, I can't believe this just happened. So I said to him, I said, come on, I'll go get the truck. And I can see the roads over this way and we'll get the game cart and we'll get him out of here and we'll take it back over to camp. He looks at me and he goes, you've got tags in your pocket. Sit your butt down right here and you're going to hunt the afternoon. I'm like, what? Like I grew up seeing one deer like every 3 years.
Yeah.
I just shot the biggest deer of the life I probably will ever shoot. And my buddy's like, sit down. You got some doe tags to fill. And he's a meat hunter. He just this year apologized for that too. He realized how unreasonable that was, but gosh, I love him. Yeah, we've shared a lot of stories together, as you guys probably have. That there's just stuff you guys could sit around and tell stories for days around the campfire. I'm sure.
That's why we started this. Actually, was to share just what you shared. There's some.
And
it's amazing.
I spoke up. I heard. The Lord told me, he's like, hey, if you share the story, actually, I missed a whole important part of the story. Right before we broke to go hunting that morning in the dark, we're standing with all these guys that came in from out of town. I just said, Lord, do something that's crazy enough that we know that it's you and it's not of our own strength. And then, I'm sitting here staring at this thing at the end of the day. And so I just heard the Lord say to me, share this story as many times as you can, give me glory, and I'll bless you. And so, yeah, I went around to a couple shows and told my story and spoke to a couple magazines and told my story. Unfortunately, I figured out that I shared too much. My hunting area got shut down for overhunting. So it was actually closed for 10 years. So it's, you gotta, I've noticed here in Colorado, people don't really give you much input on even what unit to hunt. It's
almost rude to ask. Like, you got to be close. It's a different culture thing.
Yeah.
The mountain states are different.
I shot a buck in Wisconsin and a few years ago, and the culture was different around it. Like, this was a buck that they'd been watching. They knew it was in the area. I didn't know it was in the area They just invited me and told me to sit in a stand, and that's what I did. And when I shot it, I was super excited. But then when people were seeing it, they're like, "Oh, that's the buck we were watching," and I felt bad, right? Because if out west, if there's like they've spotted a buck that everybody wants to shoot, and some stranger comes in and shoots it, that's like bad juju, right?
Yeah.
But they were like proud of it because it was like, "Oh, you shot it on our plot," like, and they were sending pictures to their buddies. He got him, They were all excited. Where out west, it's a different culture. It's like you shut the hell up, but where you see stuff, Yeah. Just like one of our mottos is share your spot.
Shot, not your spot.
I always mess that up. Share your shot, not your spot. Right?
Where's your spot?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a guy once, he saw the deer I shot and he's like, "Oh yeah, where were you out at?" And I just picked some arbitrary location in Montana. And he's like, "Oh yeah?" And he pulls up his phone, he pulls up on X and he's like kind of zooming in. He's like, "Were you in this chunk of public here next to here?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I didn't really have my GPS, And he's like,
meanwhile, your eyes are like,
yeah. And he's like, "Oh yeah. So, and I think you were right here, weren't you?" And he showed me, and obviously wasn't anywhere near I was hunting, but I'm like, "Yeah, that's actually where I was. A good, good spot."
You got it.
But like, that's a no, unless we're buddies and I'm freely sharing that with you, like,
Yeah.
Well, especially in this day and age with social media, you've even experienced a lot. You had this incredible experience you wanted to share with people, but in the end, it ruined that spot for a little bit. So it's hard to find that balance. But like with this podcast, we love to get people on to share that story because we can bond over all these stories, but it's just like, we don't want your spot. We just want the memories and kind of your feelings of your special moment, how you had it in this.
Yeah. No, it's totally true. I mean, so going back to what you're saying about Wisconsin, everybody celebrates that area. We're now hunting in an area and we're renting from a guy who's an outfitter. We're not paying to hunt his properties, but we're just renting his side-by-side. I'm sorry, double wide. Yeah, we're sleeping in a UTV. And then this year he got to know us well enough. He's like, "Hey, I need some doe management. If you guys want to come back in December and do doe management for me, come stay at my main lodge." And, we hung out. Well, I felt comfortable enough to show him a picture of this deer. He goes, now, mind you, I shot this in 2010, right? He goes, "Oh, is that the deer that ended up in a couple magazines from up here?" I'm like, he goes, "Yeah, my buddy has trail camera pictures of that deer." I'm like, "Oh, what did I just do? Like, am I going to get lamb-basted?" I've been accused of poaching. I mean, the jealousy comes out of people. Some people celebrate, but I found out that mentality of us having a cabin, everybody celebrates, and you celebrate the cabin next to you. It's not shared online. There's a lot of people online that will get jealous and throw all kinds of stuff out there. I'm sure you guys hear it too, and get reviews and people talking badly about you. But it was pretty funny how a guy that saw a trail camera had it on his phone from over 10 years ago. And I'm like, "Yep, I got the same trail camera." So you and I talked to the same guy. Because he's broken up. His one brow point is 9 inches, but his other one, and he's symmetrical all the way around, almost to like 1/8 of an inch symmetrical all the way around. And his left one is snapped, still 4 inches, which is a big brow tine, right? But if you look at the symmetrical, he was at one point on that trail camera, he was over 200, probably around 205 inches. Just insane.
Just a pig.
Yeah, and so the mentality of my dad back at the little cabin, we shot one deer every few years and cut the skull cap off, put it up on the cabin wall. I called him driving down the highway. My buddy was driving, so I could talk to my dad. And I said, "Dad, I just shot the biggest buck of my life." And he's like, "Really? How much did it weigh?" I'm like, I don't know, like a lot, like big. It looks like a cow. He goes, "Oh, how many points does it have?" I'm like, actually, I don't know, 13, 15. I lost, I forget. And kind of goes, "What do you mean you forget?" I said, "I don't know, but this is definitely what I'm going to have to pay to get taxidermy." And he goes, "Just cut off the skull cap and hang it on your wall." I'm like, "No, Dad, I think I'll get in trouble if I do that with this guy."
Oh yeah, you
yeah, it's
think
that
you got
mentality
hate
of-
now? Imagine if you were to just
Skull cap
just
him.
throw it in the pile in the yard. Like,
Yeah, give it to a dog.
yeah. Oh, that's another one of my pet peeves. I had people ask me for horns we find,
Yeah.
and my question is, well, what do you want? Oh, I want my dog to chew on something. I'm like, absolutely not. You're not touching any of my drops I find to make them your dog toys.
Even that outfitter, when I was trailing a doe that I'd shot, I found a nice shed, not anything giant, but it's a nice shed of probably a 2.5-year-old, maybe a 3.5-year-old. And so it wasn't mine. I offered it to the guy. I'm like, hey, I found this. Do you want it? He goes, nah, go ahead, take it. But you don't just pick that up and take it off of somebody's property.
No, you
Yeah.
ask. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. For sure. Huh. Yeah, it's just it seems like there's different cultures of hunting, but there is kind of a overarching theme to it all, And what I've noticed is if you boil it down, we're all kind of out there for the same reason, right? If you can throw away the jealousy, if you can throw it, because there's people that cheat too, right? How many people have been caught with poaching deer or like falsifying deer, sending to get them in, and they're like broken horns and screwed in and re-taxidermied up, So if you can wash all that crap out of the way, I do think we're just out there, to kind of experience nature and be there and have that moment where you're jumping up and down with your grown ass man friend and like little girls, right? Like there's something magical about that.
Don't ask my buddy that. He won't admit to that. But no, it's a challenge. I mean, you're challenging yourself, and the more you challenge yourself, the more when something happens, it just feels so much better.
Yeah.
Because you've done it right. You've done it the hard way. You've grinded yourself to the bone. All those times you go out, you come back, your wife's like, I saw one in the backyard. What the heck, man? Why can't you find anything? And then to actually have it actually pay off and to be over blessed is just, yeah, that's something that when I'm said before, that there's things that you learn hunting with your parents, hunting with your grandparents, with your hunting buddies, your dad's hunting buddies. There's lessons you learn through that whole process that help you be a better human being in life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think just what you said earlier, and we've talked about it before, is so much of that deer that's hanging behind you is not the deer. It's the whole trip, right? That makes that deer valuable to you, right? Because your great grandchildren aren't going to have the value of that mount that you do, right? Because of that experience with it. So when you're out there doing it, it's even more of an incentive to do it right. Because, and we've talked about this before, I couldn't imagine like cutting a corner or cheating or poaching or something, even if it was huge, mounting it on my wall and looking at that and knowing every time I look at it that
It's a corner you cut.
Yep. I didn't get that like I should have got it. And it would ruin it. It would ruin it. So like Garett had a really nice bull earlier this year that we were trying to get on, and we'd been following him for like 2 days, and we finally got on him and finally saw him because we were hearing him, and he was only about 100 yards over the private fence, and we were back in there like,
nobody would know.
Nobody would know. But that's kind of when you judge your character, right? What do you do when nobody's watching? And it would have been a quick drag. He would have been out onto public, but it was like, this isn't my bull if I got to do that. This isn't what I want. Yeah.
There are so many people that trespass. So many people. And when we had a little 4-acre property, it's a postage stamp, right? And I set up a stand corner of the woods, but it was on the edge of a fence line. Well, that's not my property. I called in this really nice 10-point, real close. He was probably about 30 yards. I was archery hunting, but he was on the other side of the fence. So it's really cool to watch him, right? But I was never tempted to shoot over the fence. And then 2 years later, after getting to know my new neighbor, I asked him, are you okay if I shoot over the fence? And he's like, oh yeah, why not? I'm like, okay. But that's just, I grew up respecting people's property lines. So when I'm having stuff stolen off my little 4-acre property in the middle of nowhere, that's not surrounded by people living, and people stuff's getting stolen everywhere, stands disappearing. Come on, people.
Yeah.
That's not a hunter. That's
No.
somebody that's out there to kill or just to steal. And I
Yeah.
don't get that mentality.
I don't either. And speaking of your place that got ruined, it got overhunted. There's a lot of stuff that'll happen and I'm sure it's not just Montana. I'm aware of Montana. Is word will get out like, hey, there's an elk herd on this public. And that next morning there'll be just lines of people, and it's like a firing line, and they just drop elk right and left, and it makes me sick. I would never go. We went to one once inadvertently. We were antelope hunting. It's like, actually, we antelope hunted when we were little, and then we kind of stopped. And Garett had never shot an antelope. Well, we got back into it later. When I say later, like
5 years ago.
Yeah, maybe a little longer than that. But when we first started, you're 12, 13, 14, maybe 15, we antelope hunted, and then we didn't antelope hunt again until we were like in our 20s. So there's a chunk of time in there. We got back to do it. We went around, scouted, found some antelope, and now I look back on it after we've started, and the antelope we were getting excited about weren't.
Yeah,
we're small, but we were, we were just like, oh, there's a good one.
It's the accomplishment.
Yeah. Well,
that's what I was telling somebody about this year, because it's all new to me. Like, I'm probably not going to archery hunt unless I do. I'm just scouting because I'm going to do this with my rifles first, and then I'll up the game, the hardness game. I don't want to be able to observe and learn. But I said I'm okay with just a cow. I'm okay with a couple does. I'm not out there. I'm not a trophy hunter, and I know some people are like, oh, he's going to shoot a small bull, and that's next year's bull. Yeah, you know what? Everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
that's why they have youth season, and you let them shoot whatever they want to shoot, and you don't tell them it's not a good deer because it's only a little 4-point. That's a 4-point for whitetails. That's not an 8-point.
yeah,
or 10-point.
So let me ask you this: speaking of youth season, all right. So when Montana has one, and I'm purposely asking this it's kind of controversial, right? Youth season happens before normal season where everybody else can go out. So you take your little kid out and they're hunting deer that haven't been pressured yet that year. Do you think there should be a limit on what they can shoot? You think it's fair that some guy's been hunting a chunk of land forever and he knows there's this great deer in there, and then in youth season a 12-year-old kid comes out there and shoots this record book deer? Is that fair? Should it be that way? Or should it be, youth season, you can shoot everything you want underneath, a certain class?
I think it's all about kids. I think hunting is an important industry where you have to have kids involved in it. You don't want to see it die out. So, and as Jesse's saying, it doesn't have to be the biggest deer. It just has to be
that's not my question. I'm not wanting kids to stop. I'm asking, is it okay to have a 12-year-old kid go out there and shoot a 200 class deer?
Heck yeah, America.
Did the guy who's been hunting it all year put that deer there? Did he raise it?
No, and that
is it his deer?
Yeah.
No, but also think of that. There might be some implications there. Is that kid ever going to beat that deer?
Who cares? That's for the kid to decide.
No, yeah,
I still go whitetail hunting.
Yeah, but you were addicted before you shot that. Right? Like this kid's first bump and he gets that, and it's like, okay, what? No one is going to beat me. I'm never going to beat myself. Just a question. I don't know where I land on it, but
my son's 21 now, and one of my favorite memories ever was his very first hunt, and he shot. It ended up being a button buck. We thought it was a doe, but man, you would think that he just like won the Super Bowl. He was like, he's pumping, he was so fired up. And then over the next, I think 3 or 4 youth seasons, I would just sit and film him and sit behind him. And it's crazy how each year the deer got bigger. And then his conversations are, all right, I'm going to pass the first couple until I see one I want to shoot. And he started to have those maturing thought processes that I didn't have until I was in my 30s. And he's like, okay, I'm going to pass. Yeah, I think I'll pass the next one. No, I'm going to take them. You have those conversations in your head, and to be able to sit back as an observer and giving those kids that opportunity. But I actually had him on I think it was two, or it was at least 3 deer, and I think 2 of them were at least bigger than this one here, so probably, I don't know, 150 inches. And it was last light. I had him laying prone in a cut bean field. I can see them in my binoculars, but he couldn't find them in his scope.
Ooh, that's
And
frustrating.
they were, I'm not kidding, they were,
Ugh.
and they're just standing on this pool table, nothing, at maybe 100 yards. And I'm like, pull the trigger, Jack, pull the trigger. And he's like, I can't see it. So he learned that frustration. He's just laying there on the ground crying as a little boy.
Mhm.
He might have been 12 at the time. But to be able to pick himself back up and get back on the horse and go back out hunting again, we've all done that.
Yeah.
And so to watch a kid do that, and then it helps him in life dealing with adversity in sports, adversity with not getting a grade you want. There's so many life lessons that come from that. So to answer your question in long form, I don't care if he shoots a 300-inch whitetail deer or a 500-inch bull on his very first and during youth season. Man, if the Lord wants to bless them, the Lord's going to bless them.
Would he go hunting again? Like, how many more trips does he have before it's like, there's not 200-inch deer everywhere? There's not 400-inch bulls everywhere? Like, then why am I out here? I already, ding, I got the crown. Next.
All right. So when you first put this up in your office and every day you walk in
Yeah.
and you see that, and then you go out hunting the next year and you're passing on deer because it doesn't get your heart pumping. And then you start realizing a couple years later, oh, that little trash buck that I shot, that's actually a big deer. Like, I didn't realize that at the time because it was the year after I shot this one. So it does ruin you, but
Can it come back?
it's back.
Good.
It's back.
Good.
Yeah, my last day of the hunt, I'll shoot a fork horn last day of the hunt because I want the meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day, Jesse. It was good to catch up with you and kind of share some stories.
I'd definitely like to have you back on maybe after your mule deer and elk go in Colorado. See how it went.
Yeah, and we'll talk. I should know more about the processes with the national parks then too.
Yeah, I kind of want to stay up on this moose and beaver thing. Maybe we'll get. Are you team moose or team beaver?
Well, I'm an outdoor guy. I like them both.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
That's
really
the right
am.
answer.
I don't
really
know.
am.
I might be team beaver.
No comment. No
All
comment.
right.
Hey, guys, I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Anytime I can sit and talk hunting with anybody, I did it last Saturday for coffee. I just love it. It's cool to share stories, and I get to listen to you guys all the time. I appreciate your show, so I get to hear your stories. So as a sales guy, I've always been taught to talk 30%, listen 70%, but I've been listening 100%. So I appreciate you letting me talk 70% this time.
Yeah.
No problem.
No problem.
That probably made no sense whatsoever.
No,
I get it.
Well,
Yeah.
I was a salesman for 5 years, so I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
But be sure to check us out on YouTube, Instagram,
TikTok.
TikTok is
Facebook.
back. Don't have a Facebook yet.
Oh, I thought you were working.
I have a Facebook. We're working on getting a page.
We're working on it.
But
It's
until
coming up.
next time, we will be
Surviving the week
to live on the weekends.